to the Inside the FLX podcast, tackling issues, talking politics, and much more here in the FingerLakes1.com studio. I'm Josh Durso, and today's guest is Seneca County District Attorney Barry Porsch. He's here to talk about his reelection campaign, the job as top prosecutor, and much more. Barry, thanks a lot for stopping in.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks for having me.
So, for those who might not actually know you, tell us a little bit about yourself as the person.
Well, I was raised in this county. I was born in Pennsylvania, moved here at a young age. My father got a job at the Sylvania plant. I've been living in the same house since 1974. I inherited my parents' house. My wife and I lived there. Graduated Minders Academy, class of 1976, the bicentennial year. After high school, I went to work at the Sylvania plant, was a member of the Steelworkers Union there for 9 years until the place closed. And from there, I went to Kodak, worked as a mechanic at Kodak for about 4 years. And while I was working at Kodak 12 hours a day, I went to night school, community college, 4 nights a week. And in 3 years, I ended up getting a 2-year degree. After I earned that 2-year degree, I left Kodak for good, and I thought it was going to be temporary, but I got admitted into Cornell University. Went to Cornell, finished my last 2 years there, got a bachelor's degree in industrial labor relations. My plan was to go back to Kodak after college, but my last year there at Cornell, Syracuse University offered me a full scholarship for law school. I never thought about being a lawyer before, but I couldn't pass up a 3-year education for free, so I went to Syracuse Law School, which is right next to the Carrier Dome, as Jim knows, and got my law degree. And I was hired by the appellate division of the New York State Supreme Court in Rochester as a staff attorney. It was a 2-year clerkship, so I was going to go there for only 2 years, then go on to some other job. However, I never left. They offered me a permanent job after 2 years. I ended up staying over 16 years, got promoted 5 times. 8 years ago, I decided to run for Seneca County District Attorney while I was still working at the appellate division. I had a really good presiding judge who I worked for. He let me take my 3.5 months of accrued vacation. I didn't take much vacation time there. I was able to come down here, run for DA, beat the incumbent in the Republican primary, in the independents and conservative primaries also. And then I beat his former first assistant in the general election. I've been DA for 7.5 years, and I'm running for re-election this year.
Now, that experience in Rochester in the appellate division, how did that sort of train you and get you into the place where you said, okay, DA, that's the next step. That has to be the next logical progression here?
Well, for 16 years, I reviewed trial transcripts, records on appeal, legal arguments concerning criminal law. And after 16 years, I decided, hey, I can do that too. And I knew the law. That's all it is, research and write. And we decided cases. I wrote the judges the decisions, a lot of them for them. And I saw what was going on here in Seneca County. It was kind of a rough time for Seneca County. A lot of people had lost confidence in the criminal justice system here in this county. And I said, you know what, I think I can do better. And I decided to run. I believe I am doing better.
Now, that said, expectation versus reality. When you took the job and when you started getting into the daily grind of it, was it more than what you expected? Was it less? Was there some things that you picked up that you didn't really expect, or what was that like?
I knew I'd be working hard, and I've worked hard ever since. I work about 7 days a week. A lot of evenings, I'm out there a lot of Saturday nights, Sunday nights working. I knew it was going to be hard work. That didn't surprise me. The work was a lot different, obviously. It was much more varied. You know, one minute I'm handling a traffic ticket, the next minute, talking to a lead investigator on a murder case. So the variance is quite large in the job, but it's a very busy job. Don't take much time off in that job either.
Now, what made you say this time around that you want to continue, you want to keep going with this work? Were there things that you still wanted to accomplish, or kind of like an end goal in mind, or what was that mindset like?
Well, I believe I'm doing a good job for the people of Seneca County. I've made a number of promises when I first ran in 2009. I kept those promises. And I want to continue serving the people of this county. I believe I am the best candidate. Well, I know I am the best candidate in this race.
Now,
as far as cases I got coming up, I have a double rape case here in October. 2 defendants raping 1 female. I have that. That's a big trial. I got 3 trials tomorrow, actually, in South Waterloo Town Court, along with 170 other cases in that court. We have the O'Connell murder case we're still working on. I meet with the investigator on that case at least once a week.
Now,
we have a huge kidnapping case we're working on.
Right. Now, so there you go. You have these, like as you said, over 170 cases.
Tomorrow, Waterloo Town Court, 3 of them are trials.
What is like, what is it like to try and manage all of these? Because that's really what you have to do. You have to manage all of these different things. How do you manage all of the different cases and keep yourself sane in the process?
Well, as far as the town court now tomorrow, a majority of those are traffic tickets.
Mm-hmm.
So we go in, we talk to one driver at a time, offer them a reduction if they qualify.
Right.
Then they go up in front of the judge. But we do have a criminal calendar too. We have criminal cases. I review all the files before I go to court. The 3 cases we have bench trials on where the judge will decide guilt or innocence. We served the subpoenas about 3-4 weeks ago, talked to the witnesses, prepared myself for that. So you have to be prepared before you go to court.
Now, as you move through the process of running again, how do you take the politics out of your job and ensure that you are doing the right things for the right people? Because really, this is not a job there is no politics, or there should be no politics in the criminal justice system in theory, but you do have to be reelected or you have to be elected. So how do you battle through that process and make sure that the right things are being done?
Well, we're out to do the right thing every day. The way you keep politics out of my office is you don't bring it in. We've never brought politics to my office. I've never hired anybody on the basis of politics. We've never decided a case, okay, Republican, Democrat, we're going to decide it this way and this way because they're that party. In my office, I have 6 employees. Mm-hmm. 3 of them are Democrats, 2 are Republicans, 1 is an independent. I'm a Republican. Mm-hmm. So we really don't deal with politics inside the office. You just don't bring it in. And you treat everybody fairly and equally.
Mm-hmm. Now, what is the major difference, if you were going to identify one or a couple major differences between yourself and your opponent this time around? Excuse the train. The train is completely fine. It goes by here several times a day, and it's just a part of life.
Josh, could you repeat your question? I couldn't hear what the train was.
A couple major differences between yourself and your opponent, Joe Sapio, of course.
Okay. Well, the big difference is I've never represented a criminal defendant in my life. Never planned on it. I either worked in factories for 13 years, worked in the court system, been a prosecutor for 8 years. My opponent has dedicated his life to representing criminal defendants and drug dealers and drunk drivers. That's probably the biggest difference between us. The other big difference is in this campaign. We had to get a number of signatures to get our names on the ballots. I had people circulating my petitions. He had people circulating his petitions, probably about 20, I'm guessing. I reviewed them at the Board of Elections. 5 of those people have criminal records. They're criminals. They're drunk drivers, welfare fraud. Those are the people that are supporting his campaign. I don't have those people supporting my campaign. His number one backer is the former Republican chairman of this county from about 11, 12 years ago who was convicted of election law fraud. He's his number one backer. He committed improprieties in this election. We had to take him to Supreme Court, and we won there. We proved our case there that it was improper what he's doing.
Now, of course, as you move through, so you have a primary coming up. That's obviously your number one concern. Yes. But have there been any sort of like principles that you have tried to instill in the people working around you to help you get reelected? Because of course it's not a one-man operation. It takes a team to get it across the finish line. What has that sort of been like in you trying to keep the people on the same page with you?
Well, as far as my staff, we're going to work each day, and we're just doing our job each day. I go to work each day. It's tough to run a county-wide race, and I was in the office today until I came home early and for lunch and to come down here. But we go to work every day. We don't do any campaigning there in the office. So I got to work all day and then go out at night and the weekends.
So goals for the next term. Should you be reelected, what are sort of the bucket list items that you're looking at right now that you really want to start to address this next time around?
Well, we're going to continue doing what we've been doing. Watch the cost. Our budget doesn't go up on expenses every year. So my first year in office, I cut it over $125,000 a year the first year. So we're going to keep watch out for the taxpayer. The second thing is we're going to continue to work hard. I work 7 days a week. When I took over, they had 3 attorneys do the outside appeal work because they didn't have the expertise here in that office. I'm doing that work along with trials, along with my regular job. We're going to continue doing that. We're not going to hire outside attorneys. We have a couple of really big cases coming up that we're going to see through. We're just going to keep on going to work each day and keep on doing a good job.
Now, a couple of the more high-profile cases that have taken up, as we were talking about before, a lot of your time, the Carlson case and the Bardot case, of course. What were those experiences like, and what did you take from them after going through them and living through them, and how you sort of treated your job after the fact?
Well, the first case was the Carlson case. First thing I want to say is you are not going to see anything in my campaign literature or mailers about bragging about the Carlson case. The Carlson family is a very good family here in Seneca County and Varick. I know a lot of them. They're friends of mine. Unfortunately, they had one member of the family, Carl, who was evil, and that consumed about 2 years of my life. It was a very difficult case, and when I was all done with that case, you say to yourself, "Well, I'll never have another case like this again." And sure enough, then we had the Roger Bardot case right afterwards. But the Carlson case worked 7 days a week. The state police assigned an investigator to my office, Jeff Arnold. He had a desk right in my office for 6 months. We worked together. John Clear from the sheriff's office was the lead investigator, and he did most of the work on the case. And it was an all-consuming case. Didn't take any time off during that case. We went through 5 days of suppression hearings. We had jury selection for 6 days, 6 or 7 days. We were just about ready to give our opening argument when the defendant had a change of heart and decided to plead guilty. And then the second case, we had a little bit of arrest, not much, but the Roger Bardot case happened where he faked an assault on himself. The police knew almost immediately. They knew before they keyed me in, but once they told me what didn't happen, we put that case together. He was never arrested, but we put the case together. I put it in front of a grand jury. They indicted him. Then it was another 2 years, year and a half, 2 years of litigation. And he hired one of the best attorneys in New York State, Gary Muldoon. He actually wrote the book on criminal law. Judge Bender has a copy on his desk. I have a copy. So I went up with one of the best attorneys in that case. Also the Carlson case, he hired Larry Kasparic, who's one of the top defense attorneys in Rochester. So Mr. Muldoon, he put me through the hoops. They wouldn't agree to anything. We went all the way through a trial. And that case was very difficult because in that case I had to prove a negative. Normally in a criminal case you prove that somebody did something, like somebody stole this item or somebody shot the gun. In that case I had to prove that something didn't happen. I had to prove that two guys didn't strangle him and hit him over the head with a toilet tank lid. So I hired two national experts. We had 6 of his doctors come and testify they didn't have any injuries. So we put the case together, went to trial, proved my case, and I won. Then he took an appeal to the appellate division and appealed to Court of Appeals. I won all the way up there. The case has been concluded. But it was a difficult case. That took up 2 years of my life. Didn't have any vacation time.
Now, one of the interesting, you just mentioned the logistics of, I want you to talk about this a little bit, the logistics of getting the other people. So if someone shows up to court and they see all these people, these witnesses, these experts, these people who are speaking, that's arranged. You are the one who ultimately has to get those people there. Talk to us about the logistics of not only having to mind the case, but also have to make sure that the right people are there on the right days, the right time. That has to be, it's a really expanding role.
That was a tough case. I spent hours and days because in that case, again, I had to prove a negative. Normally when somebody has an injury, a strangle mark or a broken bone, you hire a doctor to explain that injury to the jury. In this case, I had to find an expert or two to explain why the person wasn't injured the way they claimed. And I did a lot of research. I found this doctor who used to be the assistant chief medical examiner in New York City. He was the chief medical examiner in Washington, D.C. He was currently working for the state of West Virginia, as a medical examiner. I hired him, sent him all the medical records, which were about that high, plus about 32 discs. And then I hired another doctor from Albany, who's the medical examiner up in Schenectady in Albany County, and had them look over the records. And they came and they told the jury, normally if somebody's strangled or somebody's hit over the head with a toilet tank lid that weighs 15 pounds, what you could expect to see as an injury. And in this case, the defendant's hair wasn't even messed up, no marks on him. And they have to be able to explain that to the jury. You know, and they had a lot of experience. Normally they testified the other way, but in this case they had to testify the opposite. So it was difficult putting that case together. Then having all these doctors come in from Geneva General and Rochester Hospital. Doctors don't like to sit around the courthouse for days.
Yeah.
So that was tough. And I think I had 40 witnesses. And then we had the two people that he tried to blame. We found video at the store that they both had solid alibis.
Right.
So we disproved that these two other guys had anything to do with it. The case really came together good.
Now, one of the big issues that's impacting every official and really everyone, the heroin epidemic. How, if there were a way to sort of, from the prosecutor side of things, what do you think are some of the steps or some of the things that could be done to maybe start to curb this back a little bit, the problem that seems to keep growing and growing and growing?
Well, it is a huge problem in this county. It's huge all across the country. When I was a kid, we didn't have heroin in Seneca County. Heroin was an inner city problem, but for some reason, a lot of our young people, even middle-aged people, like to take it. Mm-hmm. I don't have a solution to society's problems. I'm a prosecutor. When the police make an arrest, I prosecute. I prosecute drug cases and other cases to the full extent of the law. It's up to our judges to decide what that defendant's sentence is going to be, whether he decides whether it's jail or prison or probation, not me. So that's what my role is in the criminal justice system, and I fulfill that to the fullest.
Now, is when you look at, now one of the things you mentioned was being able to cut your budget that you did. That's a big success, obviously. When you look to New York State, because obviously some of your funding and things like that are coming from New York State, how do you, what are some of the things that you wish, or if you had a magic wand to just change, to make your job easier, to make things easier to prosecute? What kind of things would you like to see done at the state level to help you do that better?
Well, I want to clarify things. We do get some state aid. However, the only state aid that goes to my office actually goes to the county treasurer's office. Right. It reimburses 40% of my salary, and it reimburses $35,000 of my first assistant's salary. Mm-hmm. So that's all it does is reimburse two salaries. We don't get aid for equipment or anything else. So that's the only aid that I really have to deal with. Obviously, people would like more aid for all sorts of things, treatment and law enforcement, and everything else like that. And there's not a whole lot to go around.
Now, are you going to be, your opponent did hold meet and greet recently, a couple other events. Do you have any events scheduled over the next several weeks leading up to the general or even before the primary?
I do not have any events like meet and greet. I'm a working DA. Mm-hmm. I work a lot of hours each day in my job. I really don't have time to have meet and greets. I am going out door to door. I've been doing that since the beginning of June. But I don't have time for a lot of events. The party may have one or two events here coming up, I believe, mm-hmm. that they're going to schedule. But I have to go to work. I have 3 appeal briefs that I have due in the next 2 weeks.
So before we go, what is if you were going to give voters one reason why they should continue to support you and support you for another term, what would that be? Integrity.
Mm-hmm. We run our office by integrity and honesty. We treat everybody the same. We're fair. We're not controlled by any political bosses or anybody behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. Those people are supporting my opponent. We run a tight ship. We work hard. We're doing the right thing for the people of Seneca County.
Well, we really appreciate you coming on, and I'm sure we'll be having you on again to talk about some of the other things going on in your job as well.
Thanks, Josh. I appreciate having me on.
That's going to do it for us today. I'd like to thank Barry Porsch for stopping by. We'll be back in 2 weeks with Chris Lajewski, director of the Montezuma Audubon Center. Inside the FLX airs Sundays at 7 p.m. on Spectrum Channel 12 and is available on iTunes, Stitcher, and the FingerLakes1.com app. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.